Nation Sports Talk up, rolling right into Sugar Bowl week, New Year's week. Hope you're having a great day. Today, I was sitting in the backstage and I saw Tom's comment, is Sean flying solo today? And I mean, I don't know. I don't see anybody else who is here right now other than maybe, oh, there he is. Jesse Stiers in the house. Vince is in New Orleans. I don't even know if Vince is actually in New Orleans yet, based on the itinerary that he gave me the other day. I think they were flying at like 9:30 this morning and South Bend to Chicago, O'Hare, of course, Chicago to Dallas, lay over there, and then Dallas down to New Orleans. So he might not be down there yet.
I wish we could redo my entrance because I was queuing up a song, but you caught me off guard.
Well, if you played the song, we'd get hit with copyright infringement. So,
all right, good point then.
Yes. So, Irish for Life 99. I don't think Vince's wife would go with you crashing with him. His wife is along for the journey. She's not. I don't believe she's going to the game in any. I know she's not going. Like press box capacity, which means she's not going to the game because they're not going to pay for tickets to the game. So, but she is in the hotel. So, Vince will be here tomorrow, though. Vince is going to be doing the show from New Orleans with me tomorrow. So, I don't know. I guess he's there. Media day was today. He's not down there for that, but he'll be here. He'll be here on tomorrow's show. Hope you had a great Christmas. I'll tell you what, I don't know how many football games I watched last week.
A lot of football games.
I think I literally watched more football in 1 week than I've ever watched in 1 week in my life. Every day was another football game. And that was a good thing, especially because, we had all kinds of family in town coming and going for Christmas and all that kind of stuff. And I did discover like the easiest way to avoid conversation that you don't want to get into, like what are the two things that you don't want to talk about when the family's around? Politics and religion, right? And it was just very easy to avoid any of those conversations as long as there was a football game on. And we were all just watching that, I felt like. I don't know what you thought.
I mean, I love the amount of football there's on because it's vacation, in my opinion. And on vacation, when it's this crappy weather, it was cold and rainy a lot of the time, it felt like. Wanted to watch some football. It's bowl season. It's NFL season. I'm just surprised that you didn't get sick of me because I think in a lot of the games you were watching is because I had vested interest through various different bets.
Well, your ebbs and flows of emotion with every bet, that I wouldn't say that I didn't maybe get tired of from time to time, but I did feel for your fiance Naomi from that aspect. So
hey,
I'm just impressed, like no one talked about kicking the Steelers off of ever coming back for playing on Christmas again after getting their butts whipped by the Chiefs on Christmas Day. There's no talk. Did the Steelers actually belong on Christmas Day? There was none of that, even though they showed they didn't. But man, I think Tuesday was literally the only day last week I didn't watch football, meaning multiple football games. Cause I think that was like USF and whoever they were playing in their bowl game last Tuesday. Otherwise there was just either NFL or college all the way around. Tyler wants to talk about the Cowboys. I don't know what there is to talk about. Like, I did come home from the basketball game at halftime yesterday, and it's like, oh, Cowboys are down at half. Okay. Oh, the Eagles scored right away. Oh, they scored again. That was over. Put me out of my misery very quickly. We rolled off that.
I mean, half the cap is out between CeeDee Lamb and Dak. So
I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear your excuses because Kenny Pickett won that. If Kenny Pickett can do it.
No. One of them has Saquon Barkley and the other one has Rico Dowdle.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I've decided to start a new award in honor of Kurt Signetti and Pat Narduzzi. And I came up with the name for it today, and I wanted to roll this out and see what you think. It's called the Non-nads Award.
I mean, Pat
or the
Narduzzi
non-nads award, however you want to emphasize it.
Pat Narduzzi was captain no-nads after, in overtime, deciding to play for more overtime instead of winning the game. Like, that's got to be the definition of no-nads.
Yeah,
if we're being honest.
Yes, I don't disagree with that. Like, you're at the 1 yard line. You could have won the game on 4th down. Instead, you kick, you tie, you go to overtime, and you end up losing.
You know who would be the opposite of the No-Nads award is your boy Brent Venables at Oklahoma. He at least
went for two. He went for two. That's right.
Against Navy.
That's right. Salina guys go for it. That's what it's all about.
But you get that's like the opposite ends of the spectrum. You got that's how you define the award right there. Are you Dan Campbell or are you Pat Narduzzi?
That's exactly right. And Curt Cignetti again falls into that. And Narduzzi, both of those guys just showed that they both completely deserve to be in the one of them deserves to have the No-Nads award named after the Curt Cignetti, Pat Narduzzi No-Nads award. Maybe, like that seems like something that like we could bring up, at like different points during the season. Who, like the weekly No-Nads award.
Yeah.
Who wins it? How many times did Pat Narduzzi win it during the season? How about Curt Cignetti? Oh, well, thank you very much, Anthony Solomon. He says the final donation for 2024. Thanks for a great 2024, gentlemen. Appreciate the super chat there, Anthony. Appreciate you throwing that in all year long. Oh, Salty says he does think Cignetti has nads, maybe Narduzzi's as well. Anthony says Cignetti coached like BK. Don't get blown out. Too bad. Yeah, but that's lack of nads, I think, make you do that, right?
So did our fantasy football matchup add to your week of football? Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? Did it make it more fun?
It started out, made it better. Jesse and I are playing in our fantasy football championship. I've had the number one team for most of the season. He came in third scoring team, I think, in the league, but had
a team,
sub 500 record, and now he's about to win the championship. I was hoping to win my first title in something like 17 years, but I don't think that's going to happen. So let me ask you this. Let's shift this to New Year's Day, Sugar Bowl.
All right.
Where are you, like in comparison to some other big bowl game matchups that Notre Dame has played in the past, like where are you on the excitement / confidence scale? I think we were all fairly confident in 2012, only to have that just smacked in our face very quickly. College football playoffs, maybe fairly confident. Like where are you on a sliding scale on this?
Yeah, I can very confidently say that this is the most excited I've been and the most confident I've been in a Notre Dame team. And I think those two go hand in hand because I don't think you can be confident without being excited. And I don't think you can be excited without being confident. And the reason I say that is because this is, in my opinion, the most well-coached and one of the most talented all-around teams that we've seen from Notre Dame, I think, ever since being a fan. I just believe in so much in what Marcus Freeman preaches. And really, they've given me no signs of letdown, really, since the Northern Illinois loss. Like, I haven't felt any signs of regression, only, progression towards the end goal. And that's obviously to make a playoff run. And, obviously they handled business in the first round of the playoff. I think they were up 24-3 with about 4.5 minutes left. Like, that's complete dominance. And on Twitter today, one of the guys I follow that's a mathematician and really into college football, he always does, did we get beat that bad? And Notre Dame had the best performance out of any of the first round playoff games of just dominating their opponent. They won them in the most dominant fashion over IU. And so, again, both sides of the ball, offense and defense, they have depth everywhere. I think that the number one thing that I see in this team is they're all playing for one another. They've bought into what Marcus Freeman is selling them, right? And I don't think any one person cares about their personal stats. I think they just care about the team glory that Marcus Freeman always talks about. So that gives me a great amount of confidence at the end of the day, because I think Marcus Freeman is a perfect coach. And I think they have talent all over the place. And I really think that their team speed, athleticism, agility has caught up to the rest of the playing field. And I don't think that was the case against Alabama, Clemson's, those sort of games in the past.
Absolutely. Like that, I think that team speed is, like having the ability to look back at 2020 and 2018 and 2012 and kind of seeing where some of the mirages were, like 2012, I think we thought that physically, like down in the trenches, Notre Dame was much closer than what they were. And I heard Manti Te'o talk about this when he went on Good Morning Football earlier this season. Like he said, it became very apparent very soon that Notre Dame was not in the same weight class as Alabama was in that 2012 BCS championship game. But I feel like, just like you said, from a speed standpoint, from a skill standpoint, especially in the secondary, like Notre Dame's secondary has definitely caught up. This is going to be a much more evenly matched type game than we've seen in the past from that aspect. But I also feel like just from a pure physical, like there's still some room, to grow for Notre Dame in the trenches over the next few years. But like one of the big calling cards of this team is the physicality, and again, like having the ability to kind of look back and see how some of these other matchups went, like Clemson had a freaking all NFL defensive line that Notre Dame went up against the last time they were in the college football playoff. Georgia's still really good. They've still got talent on both sides of the ball, but this is as evenly matched as Notre Dame has been in this kind of matchup, against this kind of opponent, especially an SEC opponent, probably, at least, since the turn of the century, basically, since really things in college football really started changing in terms of where the talent started being allocated across the sport.
Yeah, and just to kind of go off a couple of things you said there, I think Notre Dame's, not only is their secondary good, and I think what makes their secondary so good is obviously you have Xavier Watson, consensus All-American, but his counterpart, Adon Schuler, if you watch that film against IU, a ton of, and this was brought up by the national media as well, the reason why Notre Dame defends the run so well, especially on the perimeter, is because of Adon Schuler and the safeties. Mm-hmm. The way they roll up and down, right? Both of those guys can come down and fill the alley and tackle very well. And I think that makes it even harder when you have a good defensive line, up the middle. Is okay, naturally you want to work towards the edges, but when those safeties can come down and tackle in space, like that makes everyone's life a little bit harder. And that's really why IU couldn't get the ball, running much on the ground, and really what kind of, altered Cignetti's plan a little bit. And to kind of go a little bit further, I'm just so impressed with their linebackers as well, because these guys, traditionally you see linebackers who are pretty good at one or the other, right? Like you got like a thumper guy who's really kind of just in there to stuff run and that sort of stuff. And then you have other guys who are more of your like coverage linebackers and they're bringing pressure. But I don't feel like there's Notre Dame's linebackers between Osbury, Sneed, Bowen, and Kaiser. All those guys can play the run. All those guys can play on the perimeter. All those guys have excellent downhill speed and physicality. Yep. They're not missing out on the linebacker level, right? So I feel like that's important. And then when you go to the offensive side of the ball, yeah, Riley Leonard has his deficiencies, but I think the biggest thing and I tell this to people all the time, I don't expect Riley Leonard to win these games with his arm, because that's not really where they're built. He just needs to make some plays with his arm. But the thing I admire most about Riley Leonard is with the game on the line, I know he's going to, whether you like it or not, put his body on the line. He's going to do exactly. He's just a gamer, and yes. Again, I want him to have the ball because I know he's willing to do anything possible to win the game. And I think for me, that kind of overcomes maybe that lack of talent a little bit. And so to kind of wrap this all up,
what lack of talent? What are you talking? Who's got lack of talent?
To wrap this all up,
about here,
I told you this kind of over this past week as well. And another reason I feel confident about this game is look at the games that Notre Dame played against Georgia. I think it was 17 and 19 when Brian Kelly was around. Mm-hmm. Those Georgia teams had more talent and then the Notre Dame teams, and Notre Dame came really close in both those games. I feel like now Notre Dame has grown in the talent athleticism category. Georgia has maybe gone down a tiny bit, just, compare. And I don't think they have a stud defense like they have in the past as well. So
Look,
this is going to be a very close game. And I think this is the most that talent gap has shrunk between Notre Dame and a big-time SEC opponent.
There's just not a dominant team in this field is what it comes down to. They're like if you ranked it, Oregon has to be considered at the top of the heap because they're undefeated. They've beaten a good Ohio State team. They've beaten a solid Penn State team. Georgia's in that mix, but Notre Dame is, like, to me, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Penn State. Did I include Notre Dame in there? Those are all like drawn out of a hat right now. I think they're all very evenly matched in all of these different matchups. Like any one of those teams is fully capable of winning a national championship. Boise, like Penn, and again, I'd put Penn State at the bottom. I wouldn't put them necessarily, like if I was tiering this thing, I would definitely have them dropped off a tier with the others, like Boise State and Arizona State. Thanks for coming. You had a great season. It's just not going to happen for you this weekend. And it's definitely not going to happen, in terms of a national championship, but it's been a much more fun season, I think, because of the fact that we've had the 12-team playoff and we've got all these different teams, new teams involved and stuff like that. It's definitely, made for some different angles. And I don't think that we need to overreact to some of the results that are going to happen, over the course of the next couple of days. Just hopefully we get, at least games that are a little bit closer, a little bit more enjoyable to watch than what we had last week. You were getting ahead of yourself a little bit because we will get into some of that Riley Leonard and the running and all that stuff in a little bit, because we got to talk to both offensive and defensive players and coaches over the weekend over at Notre Dame before they packed up yesterday and headed south to go to New Orleans. We've got Al Golden, we've got Mike Denbrock, we've got some Drayk Bowen, we've got some Riley Leonard. Later in rapid fire, we've even got some Marty Biagi. So we've got a lot of everything in this show. I will say, I'll throw this up here from Andrew because he says tackling is so key. Lots of underneath stuff and running the ball. He expects screens. Kind of what you were talking about there, Jesse, with the safeties is part of it. But we've talked about the physicality that this team plays with, and they're able to play with that kind of physicality because, they have the speed and explosiveness and just, the physical stature to do it. But, yourself as a defensive player, I think like the first, kind of base layer of being able to play fast and physical starts with knowing your assignment. And that's like so much, really, like the worst blown assignments that I think that we saw all season were going on in Northern Illinois. And every game since then, it has been much better. And they were able to play with that kind of speed and physicality because they are so assignment sound. Like you just don't see a lot of blown assignments out of this team.
Yeah, I do agree that that's the number one thing to play with speed, aggression, physicality is knowing where you need to be. And I think the big reason you saw some of those issues against Northern Illinois is because what Marcus Freeman talked about, that football attitude. And I think the perfect kind of example that would describe what he means from football, and I don't know if you've seen this clip, I believe it was on the Notre Dame social media, is when Drayk Bowen kind of sniffed out that running back screen off on the perimeter where he kind of mirrors the offensive lineman and then is able to kind of come off of that and, make a play for like a loss of one or no gain. And that's not playing football. And the reason why you say that is because naturally Drayk Bowen's fit would take him inside, and that's what he did at first, but he still had the awareness to kind of go, you know what, like my senses around me tell me something else is kind of coming here. And that's when he mirrors the lineman and goes off and makes, a tackle on the running back. That's the type of stuff that you want to see is you are naturally working through your progression of reads, and then, you're able to come off of it and use your natural athleticism to go make a play essentially. And that's, I think, what Marcus Freeman wants to see most out of this defense.
By the way, before we go further, Joe says non-nads award to Lane Kiffin for disappearing when Tennessee got their butts kicked. I mean, he was doing that, like if it was the GIF, it was the Homer Simpson backing into the bush there and disappearing after that Tennessee loss for Lane Kiffin there. So, all right, well, let's get into this a little bit. We're going to hear some of these comments from some of these coaches and players that we talked about, starting with Al Golden, Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, discussed facing a quarterback like Gunner Stockton, who you may have heard has not played much this season.
I mean, there's 80 plays this year, so that's sufficient amount. And I think more importantly, when he came into the game, did they change their structure, or did he execute the system that's there? And that's usually pretty telling that they believe he can execute the system as it exists. So certainly there's things that every quarterback, when compared to another, does differently or has strengths compared to another. But so we're looking at what he did in those 80 plays and then obviously what he's done in his past.
All right, so there's Al Golden talking about Gunner Stockton. 80 plays to watch on film. 45 of them came in the Texas game. That's the most extensive action that he has had. The 45 snaps when he played, all but one play, of course, in the second half or overtime against Texas. Not a lot, 80 plays. Is it enough for Al Golden to really get a good grasp of what he thinks that Georgia's going to do with Stockton on New Year's Day?
I don't think it's going to be enough to grasp what they're going to do. And to be honest with you, I think this is the type of chess match that Kirby Smart and Al Golden are going to be playing the entire game. I don't think that Georgia is necessarily going to come out and run the same sort of offense that Beck was running. And when Stockton is in there in those 80 reps, he's kind of running an offense that is more predicated around Carson Beck's abilities and what he's good at. But now that Carson Beck is no longer the quarterback, I think what Georgia's had to do or what they've been doing in this kind of 3-week window that they've had is probably installing or putting into a kind of a, not a package, but maybe subtracting out some plays that maybe Carson Beck was good at and adding in more of plays that Gunner Stockton is going to be good at. And I think that has to do with less throwing, more RPO, quarterback kind of runs type stuff. And I'm not saying that Stockton's going to line up and run the ball a ton, but I think they're definitely not going to have as many pass attempts. And it's going to be more a run kind of heavy attack for Georgia going into this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what Notre Dame expects. There is going to kind of be that early feeling out period, just based on the fact that you did see Stockton hit a few runs and he is faster and does have more mobility than Carson Beck. Notre Dame has the number 13 pass efficiency defense in the country, though. And, regardless of whatever running skill this guy has, he's still a guy who's played in a handful of snaps this year, a handful of snaps last year, 8 total games. To me, he feels more like Tyler Buckner. You said the word package. He feels more like that than a guy who's going to have the full complement of the defense. And I'm sure that they're going to try to hit some stuff and see if they can catch Al Golden off guard early on in this game. But I just feel like the more this game goes on with the inexperience of it, they are going to want to run the ball. And obviously they're going to have to be able to run the ball. And I think that it was Andrew who said Heinisch and Rubio are going to be the X factors in this game. I feel fully confident in Gabriel Rubio as, like a run stopping, like Al Golden called him a rolling ball of nails earlier this year. You remember that? Like when he was talking, like Gabe Rubio is a road grader type guy. And there was another where Al Golden was asked about Rubio. He talked about the USC or the Indiana game rather, where Rubio sniffed out a screen, and dropped off and ran 10 or 12 yards downfield and blew this dude up, after he made the play. So he's not a one-trick pony. He's not just going to, play against the run. So I feel pretty confident in what Notre Dame is going to get from Rubio out there. And, if Georgia thinks that they can just line up and ram the ball down Notre Dame's throat, that's where they're going to, that's where it's going to be like, welcome to the party, pal, because that's not the way this game is going to go. and I don't think that they're going to line up like that and do it. Their running backs have a total of 38 receptions this season, 28 and 10 for the two running backs, Neal and Frazier. So they'll throw it a little bit, but 38 is not a lot. They're going to have to try to catch Notre Dame off guard with some of that stuff. But, just like what you were saying, just the way that both Watts and Schuler can come downhill and get to the perimeter and cut some of that stuff off. I just feel like it's, again, I just feel really good about this matchup for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what this game is going to come down to is which offensive line controls.
Frazier and ETN, by the way, not Neal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, I'm pretty sure ETN played against Texas in the SEC championship. But back to the original point, I think this game comes down to which offensive line can move the other's defensive line more efficiently, because we all know Notre Dame is a run-first team. I think with Stockton being in there, I think Georgia is going to become a run-first team. But that Notre Dame's game plan has to be kind of similar to IU's game plan, is get out ahead and make Georgia uncomfortable throwing the ball. Like that's how you want them to try to move the ball, as a young quarterback trying to, basically come back from a touchdown or two deficit with his arm. Because if you shut down Georgia's running ability, I think it's and knowing what kind of passing defense you have on the back end, and then get into downs where you can also, bring pressure and drop into zone off of that into coverage. I think that makes for a long day for the Georgia quarterback. So again, I just think it all comes down to which offensive line and run game is going to be more potent, is ultimately what's going to decide this game.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, how much can you make Stockton have to throw? Because again, he's only got like one interception in 2 seasons, but he hasn't had to throw the ball very much because of the way that he's been used. Can you contain him? Can you keep him from extending plays like the way Caleb Williams did a couple of years ago out at USC when Notre Dame was trying to get pressure on it, like that kind of thing? Because I think that's where Stockton can be the most dangerous. But can you put him into situations where he has to throw the ball? And the way you do that, obviously, is by limiting the running game on first and second down. Put him into behind the chain type situations. That's where you've got a chance of making him make the mistakes, obviously. I think that's like the big thing. I asked Drayk Bowen if they can be as aggressive against a quarterback like Stockton because of his mobility compared to Indiana's Curtis Rourke, and how aggressive they were able to be against him.
It's just, I guess yes and no. For us, it's just making sure we stop the run, and if he's going to use his legs, then we'll kind of adjust. We don't really know if that's something they want to do, or if that was just Texas thing and he was just kind of making plays. And so, it's kind of a yes and no at the same time.
Yes and no at the same time. So, what do you think, Jess? Like how that mobility, again, if you're comparing it to Curtis Rourke, who is not, he is the opposite of a mobile quarterback, much more a pocket type guy. How do you think it potentially changes that aggression that Notre Dame wants to have when you look at both his mobility and, the threat of the screen passes and stuff like that, all kind of rolled into one?
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame doesn't really need to lose its aggressive nature in terms of kind of bringing pressure on the quarterback. I just think it comes more down to having more lane integrity and understanding where your landmarks are on these design pressures, because what you don't want to do is kind of crash the pocket or get too far downfield and then allow easy running lanes for someone like Stockton and kind of it leaves that pressure a little bit, right? Like, when you bring too much pressure and the pocket collapses and all Gunner Stockton has to do is tuck it and run, like that's an easy confident boost for someone like himself in a big game. Is, okay, pocket collapses, I can pick up 5, 6, maybe even a first down with my legs. And so what Notre Dame has to do is, I think what they did so well against Caleb Williams and USC is when they bring pressure, you still have to bring controlled pressure. So the pocket is, you're not allowing the quarterback to break contain or break the pocket at the same time. And so I think that's going to be a big piece of this. And then I think the second piece of what you were talking about is, maybe you have some sort of spy who's spying on the running back for coming out of the backfield. Maybe you have a spy on Stockton in case the pocket collapses like we were talking about. But, with a quarterback like Rourke, you can kind of be more reckless with your pass rush because he doesn't have the ability to escape nearly as much. But with Stockton, I think you just have to be a bit more disciplined in hitting your landmarks and not allowing him to, break out of the pocket because you're creating pressure.
Feels like a lot of people see this. We've definitely from the Georgia perspective, and even some national people as well, see this as an advantage for Georgia, going from a pocket passer like Carson Beck, who, he had a good year. Maybe he underachieved a little bit based on some of the expectations and hype on him coming into the season. How do you see it? Is that extra mobility an advantage for Georgia in this matchup?
I don't think it's an advantage because of the athleticism that we've talked about with Notre Dame linebackers. We've seen them, fare well against some of these more mobile RPO kind of quarterbacks. And I know this isn't the same as Army and Navy, but even when teams try to attack the perimeter on Notre Dame, it just doesn't go well because of the safeties rolling downhill, the linebackers covering in space. And shoot, even Notre Dame has good corners who can tackle. So really, I don't see it being that big of a difference. And honestly, I thought that IU kind of lost out by not continuing to attack the middle of the field in the passing game against Notre Dame because I thought they had some early success. I don't know if Rourke got spooked because of that Xavier Watt, that overthrow across the middle that he had that Xavier Watts, ended up intercepting. But I think if you're Notre Dame, I wouldn't be, too worried about this extra mobility because I think you want to force, Georgia into those passing situations, right? So if I'm Notre Dame, I get heavy in the box, I create pressure, and I force Georgia to have to throw the ball. I think this actually kind of plays well into Notre Dame's game plan overall because
I do too.
I think if you wanted to have more success, you would try to spread things out and really try to pass more than run because of how good Notre Dame's defensive line and linebackers are.
They don't have that Brock Bowers type guy anymore. They don't. It would help if Stockton had a better supporting cast, I guess is what it comes down to me.
There's no more Bowers, Ladd McConkey.
Yeah. Georgia's wide receivers lead the nation in drop passes this season. Arian Smith, Dominic Lovett, London Humphreys, Dylan Bell, their top 4 wide receivers have a combined 22 drop passes this season. Smith has 10 of them, but that 22, and that's just those 4 core receivers. That's right, Michael Hahn, 30 total. So it's a lot of drop passes. Even with Carson Beck, maybe things go better for Carson Beck if they're not dropping balls all over the place. So that's like they were doing that when Carson Beck, was on the field. So I don't see it going that well for the backup quarterback because I think that Al Golden, / Xavier Watson and whoever, Notre Dame matches up very well man-to-man with that kind of receiving group when you've basically got all-American caliber defensive backs all across the secondary. And I see Stockton making, again, the more you make him have to throw, the more it plays into Notre Dame's favor. And I see him making at least 2 crucial mistakes over the course of this game Wednesday night.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely have an interception at some point because Notre Dame will force him to throw. And I do believe that, someone kind of mentioned too, this is a guy, yes, he runs better, but it doesn't mean he's an experienced runner. Like Notre Dame can still punch the ball out potentially on like they did against that Louisville quarterback who broke, a run at some point. But, I've seen it in the chat and I've seen other people kind of bring it up that, this Stockton guy is better than Carson Beck. And this is one of my favorite takes of all time. If that's the case, these Georgia coaches saw him every day in practice for the last 5 or 6 months. There's a reason why Beck was the starter. If Stockton was really that much better and really gave them that much more of an advantage, he would have been the starter all season. But that's just not the case. So I will not buy in on this spin that Georgia is better off with Stockton compared to Beck. It's just not simply the case, or else he would have been starting. He would have been starting the SEC championship. He would have been starting all these important games for Georgia. So I'm just not buying that.
Yeah, Andrew says Beck did throw for 3,400 yards, so they aren't scrubs. I'm not saying they're scrubs. They deserve to be in the playoff. But the bottom line is when you drop that many balls, he could have been better. They could have been better. You know, like part of the reason he threw for 3,400 yards is because he's a really good quarterback. And I'm just not going to buy into, you know, this whole, you know, that the backup, you know, if Stockton would have been playing all year, that they would have been better off, you know, like you're not pinning the losses on Carson Beck. You know, they went to Texas and beat Texas with Carson Beck as the starting quarterback, you know. So I'm not buying that. And, you know, we're getting the whole, you know, Dr. Gonzo is obviously a Georgia guy. Okay. Well, they can't all play in the SEC. And we've had this discussion more than once over the course of the last week. So we're not jumping back into those waters again, you know, in terms of the whole, does Indiana deserve, did they deserve to be there? Did they not deserve to be there? You know, like if South Carolina and Alabama and Ole Miss were that good, then they wouldn't have lost 3 games. You know, that's what it comes down to. Let's flip it to the other side. Notre Dame's offense against Georgia's defense. Mike Denbrock was asked about Georgia having trouble handling mobile quarterbacks and balancing that with Riley Leonard's running and the rest of Notre Dame's offense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, you know, obviously we're not built to be Georgia Tech-ish with what they did with their quarterback, and he had some success running the ball against Georgia as well. But, you know, does he have to create some plays with his feet? Absolutely. And hopefully we can get him free. And he did that, obviously. It's not a huge piece of maybe the running game necessarily, depending on who you're playing. Like Indiana, the quarterback run was part of our game plan, but it wasn't a huge piece of it. But he kind of found a way to make it work, whether it was a third down conversion or the last score of the game to kind of put things away. He finds a way to kind of use his strengths throughout the game, and I thought he did that really well, and hopefully he does that again.
Can I ask him a quick follow about the Georgia Tech comment? When you say not Georgia Tech-ish, is it because of how much Haynes King runs it?
Yeah, and how much, you know, like
20s?
the scheme, like they're running like quarterback power, like read power. So that's just, we're not really built that way like they are. But, you know, I mean, is it you know, a luxury to have a quarterback who can make plays with his feet? Absolutely. We're a little bit more built in the zone read scheme of things and things like that. So that's all I meant by that.
All right, so not Georgia Tech-ish. I've got a comment from Riley Leonard here in a second. Before I play that, did you want to say anything about what you just heard there from Mike Denbrock, Jess?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. You know, I think what he's saying is, I think a lot of people are basically saying, okay, Georgia Tech, UMass, these are teams who had success running the ball against Georgia. And I think specifically Georgia Tech becomes in the spotlight because it's a common opponent between Notre Dame and Georgia. So I think there's good film to study there on both sides. But really, you know, why it presents kind of a different aspect is, you know, defensively, Georgia's going to do things a little bit differently, knowing that that King is going to be a guy, you know, Haynes King, when he's playing quarterback, he's going to be a guy who's going to get over 20 carries. Like, he is basically a dedicated runner in that offense. And I think that's the difference that he was trying to get at, is Riley Leonard's not a dedicated runner. He'll run the ball when they need to, and he'll run the ball off of some zone looks if he needs to, but they're not lining up back there and going QB power and just telling, you know, Riley Leonard to kind of ram the ball in
Not
there.
all the time, but Riley Leonard will go quarterback power, right?
But that's more of like a goal line inside the 20 kind of package for Riley Leonard, not necessarily, you know, start on your own 30-yard line and immediately get into some QB power. That's what I like. Notre Dame has the ability to run the ball elsewhere, And I think when those things start falling apart, that's when you maybe see a little bit more of Riley Leonard, because you're testing the discipline of the defense. And I think I said this to you as well when we were with each other this last week. I think Notre Dame has gone less and less with Riley Leonard, and I think they save it for more kind of crucial moments because of the ability to ride those fakes all game.
Right. And so same day we talked to Mike Denbrock. I think we talked to Denbrock first. Yeah, we did, because Riley Leonard kind of finished the media session on Saturday. So we got to talk to Leonard as well. And I don't know if you were in the stadium, so you wouldn't have heard this broadcast. During the ESPN broadcast of Notre Dame's win over Indiana, they said that Notre Dame limited Leonard's runs during the regular season, but they were saying going into the Indiana game, if it took 30 carries against Indiana, so be it. It was like no holds barred, nothing is off limits at that point. So I asked Leonard if that was basically the approach against Georgia as well.
Definitely. I mean, obviously it worked with Georgia Tech, but they're not going to play us. I don't imagine they'll play us like they did Georgia Tech. But yeah, if that's the case, like, so be it. I don't really care.
I just found it interesting that, he brings up Georgia Tech as well, because it just feels like they're sort of downplaying, they're downplaying that success that Georgia Tech had because of what like what you and Denbrock were talking about with a specific way. Georgia Tech knows that they've got to run Haynes King. Their offense is more limited than Notre Dame's offense, where you have multiple options at running back, and Notre Dame, still has shown that they can throw the ball as well. So I guess, I don't know. What do you like? Haynes King had 24 carries for 110 yards and 3 touchdowns against Georgia in Georgia's overtime win over the Yellow Jackets. Now, some of that was because it did go, to multiple overtimes, but I don't know. What do you think it means?
Yeah, I think this is kind of, I was sitting at the Notre Dame women's basketball game yesterday, and they have a nice kind of, intro when they're going into the game. And right before they announce the starting lineup for the women's team, they have the video of Neil Ivey sitting down at a desk, and she's on a whiteboard essentially with the dry erase marker, and all she writes down is pick your poison. I think that's very relatable with this Notre Dame offense, because I think it's a chess match at the end of the day. And I think Denbrock and Riley Leonard realize that is, where's that extra defender going to be for Georgia? Is it going to be more, fitting run, or is it more or less going to be fitting pass? And that's where it comes into play, because against an opponent, like when Georgia was playing Georgia Tech, they were committing an extra defender to the box because the quarterback run. That means that, there's 25 design runs coming from the quarterback. You have to account for him when there's that many times. And so Riley Leonard doesn't run the ball 25 times. He maybe will run the ball 10 times. And so Georgia is going to err on more or less keeping that extra player not in the box, right? More of a pass defender type look. And so that's where I think the difference that comes where, okay, if they do want to present that extra defender and they like the numbers they're going to, Riley Leonard is going to run the ball, but they're not looking for Riley Leonard to run the ball first. They still have Jeremiah Love. They still have Jadarian Price. They still have Aeneas Williams. But if Georgia shuts that down, they provide an extra defender, then they know that they can use Riley Leonard as basically the king on the chessboard to move where they want at the end of the day. And so if the numbers present themselves, Riley Leonard's going to run the ball, but they're not just going to run Riley Leonard to run Riley Leonard. So I think that's the chess match that Denbrock and Riley Leonard are looking at is we don't anticipate them to play a defense where Riley Leonard has to run the ball 30 times. But if we need to, we're sure as heck going to do it, basically.
Right, but that's the thing. If the other stuff's not working and Leonard can get out there and run and keep moving the ball downfield, they have no problem with that, I don't think. Leonard said it himself. 10 is the number. You're exactly right. He's averaging 10 carries a game. The most carries he's had in a game this season is 13. And I found it interesting that because I heard that comment on the ESPN broadcast before the Indiana game, and then, Leonard didn't have his first carry till late in the first half, and he only still had a handful of carries against Indiana. And, But, it was almost like they weren't even expecting him to run when he ran for that touchdown after the pass to Jordan Faison. Like that's how focused, again, we talked about it. That it felt to me like that's how focused and fixated they had become on, making sure they weren't going to get burnt by Jeremiah Love again. And then, it's just like they just got so flipped around with everything they tried to do. Kirby Smart, no pun intended, is a lot smarter. He's been around the block. He's got the athlete. So this matchup is going to be different. I mean, I don't think that any one of us is sitting here saying that this is going to be an easy game for Notre Dame by any means. But the matchup this time around is just so different than any of the other matchups that Notre Dame has had, with either Georgia or Alabama or, Clemson for that matter. Like pick your elite team, playoff specific games that I think we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think what you were talking about of Riley Leonard not really running the ball against IU, I think that was by design. You wear a team down with your running backs and you keep showing that same look. And then finally when Riley Leonard pulls the ball, it's wide open and he can walk in for a touchdown. Like that's the overall goal is Riley Leonard is only going to be used when absolutely necessary. And that's the difference. The biggest difference, I think, to hammer between that and what Georgia Tech was doing is Notre Dame uses Riley Leonard as needed. Georgia Tech had to run Haynes King literally 25 times because that's their offense. But I like Notre Dame doing it that way because you get those linebackers trapped in that eye game, that eye movement where you're just, you're handing it off, and then boom, you fake it one time when you really need it, and Riley Leonard gets the big play that you need. And I think that's what it's really going to come down to is they're going to save Riley Leonard for those big plays. And naturally, too, what happens, this is probably my favorite part about Riley Leonard's game, is he doesn't take sacks because he feels that pressure, and some of those passing plays do turn into Riley Leonard running the ball. But that's just because he evades the pocket and is able to pick up some positive yards. And again, that is my favorite part of Riley Leonard's game is because Notre Dame, besides maybe a couple pre-snap penalties, they really don't take sacks and have negative plays because of how well they run the ball and Riley Leonard's ability when the pocket breaks down to pick up 3-4 yards essentially at the end of the day.
And now that'll be kind of one of the tests, I think, for Notre Dame, again, because athletically, Georgia's going to be the best, both physically and athletically, size and speed. Georgia's going to be the best team that Notre Dame has seen since the season opener against Texas A&M. And Georgia is, at least a little bit better than the kind of athletes that Texas A&M had. Texas A&M's front was like Notre Dame stood the test against that front. It's still the best front that the Irish have seen this season. But, the test in this is going to be, is Leonard still able to keep avoiding that kind of stuff against the best team that he is, best defense that he has probably seen all year, with those kind of athletes and that kind of thing. But as you said, Notre Dame and Leonard is just able to put teams in conflict in ways that most of them have not seen over the course of the season because of what Leonard is able to do in avoiding those sacks, because of the way Jeremiah Love is able to run the ball, and because, even though like Leonard is not going to consistently beat you deep like he did with that pass to Jordan Faison a couple of weeks ago, he is still able to hit. But like if you're going to focus on that, he can still beat you. He has shown over the course of the season that he can beat you with his arm. Like he's not going to go out there and just precision pass all over the place and beat you down the field with that kind of stuff. But he's shown that he's going to do it. I just feel like it's a matchup that favors Notre Dame more so than any of these specific kind of matchups that they've faced in the postseason before. And you pass this test, and I think that you're good for the next one as well.
The thing about it too is I think that, like the run game, Riley Leonard's passing ability is there, but it's going to be used kind of sparingly because I thought that deep shot over the middle or, that one-on-one matchup that they finally hit to Faison, I thought that opportunity was there throughout the game. just Notre Dame never really needed to take that shot because of how well they were controlling the game. You know, they were up, they were running the ball efficiently, they were controlling clock, they were picking up first downs. And so if I'm Notre Dame in a game like that, it's like against NIU, right? Where they just threw that stupid shot downfield when they really didn't need to. I just think that they saved those kind of passes for Riley Leonard, just like on that zone read where he walked in for the touchdown. They just do it when they really need you to, because they can wear you down with the running game. And not only can they they can wear you down on inside zone, they can wear you out on outside zone. Like, Notre Dame isn't a rushing attack that can only attack you in one place. And I think that's the other part that makes it hard, is you can load up the inside. And like I'd said, going into the IU game, I felt Notre Dame had the advantage of pressing Jeremiah Love on the perimeter. And that's when he broke that 95 or 98 yard touchdown run. Is basically they press the gap right on the tackle and the tight end on the end of the line of scrimmage. That's what makes Notre Dame so potent, is their rushing attack it's sideline to sideline. There's no limitations for where these guys can hit the hole. So I think that's another, that's something else Georgia has to worry about. So you start bringing up more defenders. I still believe in Riley Leonard to hit those kind of one-on-one shots like he did with Faison if he needs to.
Yeah. Just making sure, I see Dr. Gonzo is back, and, he's kind of addressed it, but as long as everybody keeps it civil in the chat, you can have your fun, you can talk your trash, but,
he's got his sidekick, the Hamburglar.
Keep it on the right side of the line. Keep it on the right side of the line. You can stay in there. So, Hamburglar is in there as well. All right, so we'll kind of finish up on the Riley Leonard running, because I think these are some kind of fun comments here from Leonard. He was asked about protecting himself when he's running the ball, and there's kind of a couple of cue and, like back and forth that here was some of these responses that he had.
Yeah, no, they don't even try it. They don't even mention it anymore. It's kind of a lost cause, but I mean, yeah.
Especially now, like season on the line, whatever it takes.
Yeah, definitely now, whatever it takes. They don't really care. I mean, they do care, obviously, but if you gotta put your shoulder down, you gotta put your shoulder down.
You mentioned along those lines, though, it's harder for you to slide because you think they mark you back.
Yes, I've been saying that. And me and CJ Carr got in this huge argument because he was like, "Dude, why do you keep doing that?" And half the time I'm being an idiot jumping and stuff. But definitely slide, definitely dive face first. Find that soft shoulder is what I like to call it. Always find the soft shoulder, and it works. And he actually changed his mind a couple weeks ago and admitted he was wrong, so to say. So that was good.
So, he's talking about protecting himself, and, is he going to slide? Is he going to go head first? And, he was talking about, the lack of sliding because they're going to mark you down a yard earlier. And I saw it. I think I was watching, I can't remember if it was a bowl game or an NFL game that I was watching yesterday. Same thing. Once you start that slide, you're going to get marked down sooner. I don't know. What do you think about this whole thing? Are you worried about Riley Leonard at this point? If he's just got kind of a no holds barred, kind of approach to his running out there?
No, I don't have a problem with it, because that's what I love most about Riley Leonard. Remember, I said kind of in the beginning of the show, his ability to put his body on the line and be kind of a gamer and someone who's going to give you, his all. I think that's what comes with it, is in the moment, he's going to be jumping and trying to run people over. That's naturally about it. I guess I would say when it comes to sliding, the thing I would be looking at is if you have a clear first down and, there's really no need to kind of lower your shoulder, then sliding's all about it, right? Because sliding only matters when you're trying to get to the first down and maybe you come up a yard short, right? And so I think I'm all for sliding in the open field once you've got a first down. But if you need to lower your shoulder and get that extra yard or jump, maybe get a little airborne to get that extra yard or touchdown or whatever it might be, that's where I'm more. So I think it's more situationally dependent, right? If I'm Riley Leonard, I don't
need to see him looking like a fullback, though, because Tua got the concussion, remember, when he lowered the shoulder and went head first and just took a knee to the helmet. So that kind of thing worries me right there. But in general, I've got no problem with Riley Leonard just dropping it. If he's chest to chest with another player or whatever, dropping that shoulder into somebody's chest, I've got no problem with that. Do you think, because Leonard, when he takes off running, I think that he's caught a lot of teams off guard with just how fast he is. Like when he's in the backfield and he gets some of that pressure like you're talking about. Do you think that stands up though against a team like Georgia? Like, is he still going to have that edge that we've seen him have when it comes to getting the edge, getting around the corner toward the sideline for some of those extra yards?
Yeah, I think what makes Riley Leonard so hard is a couple of things. One, he's deceptively fast. And two, he kind of plays like liquid, right? Because of his bigger frame and strength. Like, he's a big guy, right? And so even if you're trying to tackle a big, not fast, athletic quarterback, it's still hard because they're big guys, right? And so I think Riley Leonard has that some of liquidity to him because of his size, right? And so even when defenders get to him, they still kind of slide off of him. He gives them that stiff arm. And so when you combine speed, athleticism, and again, that I guess what I'm calling the ability to be kind of liquid, I think it's really hard because he moves his body in different ways, and he's still so very strong, tall, and powerful. And so I just think all that together just makes him that much harder to tackle. And it's just all very deceptive because on film, he just looks like kind of a big, goofy white guy, but he plays much faster and much more athletic than that.
He's like Robert Patrick in Terminator 2. Like you said, he's liquid. He's that different kind of Terminator. You think that you've got him, and then he just kind of molds and adapts, and he's able to just keep on trucking. I like it. I think he's going to be a huge factor in this game. Like when you're talking about a quarterback with a ton more experience than, Dr. Gonzo's in here, and, he's obviously very confident. He's a Georgia fan. I expect him to be confident in his guy, but I just, the experience factor between these two quarterbacks is so night and day different. And I think that that's going to be a huge factor in this game when everything is said and done. Like, you can boil all the other stuff down. I think all the other stuff is, there's, like a slight edge here for this team, a slight edge here for that team, fairly evenly matched across the board. But that's the biggest glaring, difference in this game is the experience at quarterback. And that means so much in these kind of games, is the quarterback and the experience and how the quarterback is, kind of able to look how quickly that Leonard was able to put that interception, the one real mistake that he made. And it wasn't even all on him, because you had a deflected ball, but look how quickly he was able to put that behind him against Indiana. And I don't think he necessarily said it felt like Rourke was sped up for most of the rest of the game. And I think that you're going to see that from Stockton as well against Notre Dame's defense.
I mean, it just takes a couple times for that pressure to get there, for, the pocket to collapse. And you just and Rourke had the early interception. So all those things kind of combined, just it has a quarterback kind of, on edge to a degree. And I think that's got to be the defensive battle, is just making a young, inexperienced quarterback as uncomfortable as possible. Notre Dame's defense has played better quarterbacks than Gunner Stockton and had very good success. I'm not worried about that. The only thing I'm worried about is what kind of wrinkles has Kirby been mixing in these last 3 weeks, because he's not just going to come out and be, prototypical what they've shown on film or the games that Stockton has played. This is what he's going to do. There's going to be wrinkles. And I mean, we've said it before, that's something that Al Golden thrives on, is making kind of early in-game adjustments based off of what's given to him. So again, I'm not overwhelmed by what Georgia can do offensively in comparison to some of these offenses that Notre Dame has gone against under Al Golden and his 3 seasons as defensive coordinator.
Outbound says Kirby with time to prepare is the only thing that worries him. And I mean, yes and no, because he's got a little bit extra time. But remember, they were, because of the fact that they had the bye, they were spending that first week after the SEC championship game, or, even more than that, preparing for both Indiana, and Notre Dame. And now maybe, once he started, watching film, maybe he was hedging a little bit more toward Notre Dame, but because when he's watching that film, it's probably pretty obvious to him, like where, the talent gap between the two teams. But I mean, when it all is said and done, like their on-field preparation has really, it's been the same amount of time that Notre Dame has had, because they could really only get full-fledged into Notre Dame once Notre Dame beat Indiana. So it's not like he has had a lot of extra time, and he's had no more real time to prepare for Notre Dame than Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman have had to prepare for Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, their time off between the SEC championship and the winner of the Notre Dame-Indiana game was simply what it was, time off, time for guys to get rested, heal up, that sort of stuff. And so now that there's a winner, it's just like every other game week. And actually, they have more time compared than a normal game week, because when Notre Dame finished, it was Friday, and they're going to play, basically that game on Wednesday. So you're talking about almost 11 to 12 days to prepare for a team compared to a normal game week where you have, 5 to 6 days. And so Georgia's going to have plenty of time. And it is something that worries me, because Kirby Smart is a tremendous coach. He's a national championship. He's an SEC champion, multiple SEC champ. Like, the guy is a really good coach. That has obviously been proven. And so he's not just going to lay down, right? Like, there's going to be wrinkles both offensively and defensively. And that's what makes him a very talented or a talented coach. And again, why I think the offensive line battle is really where this thing is going to come down to.
On that note, Mike Denbrock, of course, coached against Georgia when he was still the offensive coordinator at Cincinnati back in 2021, before Denbrock went to LSU. So he was asked about that, as well as getting the Cincinnati players to believe that they could win that game. His answer, I thought, was interesting.
I mean, I think you got to live in the 6 inches in front of your face, and you just got to worry about doing your job and doing it aggressively, and being a team that, of course we respect Georgia and all that their program has accomplished, and even this team, the things that this team that they have this year has accomplished. But we got to line up and play football, and this is going to be one of those type of games where you've got to be willing to pay the physical price to get what you're after. And I know they feel that way, and I know we feel that way. So a lot of respect for what they do and how they do it. Our intent is to make sure that we do what we need to do to win a game.
It was actually the 2020 season, 2021, January 1st, 2021, New Year's Day game, basically. So, but at the same time, what did you think of living in the 6 inches in front of your face? What did you think about that comment?
I took that comment two ways. One, I don't think he cares too much about, what happened in 2020 or potentially 2021. I think he cares about this team, this moment right now, right? Just focusing on what's in front of your face. And then more importantly, like he talked about too, and I think the main thing he was trying to say there is, I mean, it's what I think I've been also kind of alluding to as well. This all comes down to who's going to get the better push on each side of the, defensive and offensive line. That first 6 inches and initial contact, right? Who's going to push the other guy back 6 inches, or who's going to get pushed forward 6 inches, right? And so that is the ultimate battle to me, is that up front, in your face, who's going to be more violent, who is going to lean on each other more and move those first 6 inches. Because if Notre Dame leans on them and can get 6 inches of push, it's going to be a long night for Georgia. But vice versa, if Georgia leans on Notre Dame and they're getting that 6 inches of push up front, it's going to be a long night for Notre Dame. And so I think that's what he's talking about ultimately, is who's going to win that battle of the trenches, that first, basically, the first punch up front.
That's exactly it. And it's because like Marcus Freeman got questions on his press conference, you might remember, on Zoom last week about, you were at Cincinnati and, all these, things that happened 4 or 5 years, and like Max Bola was at Alabama. And, it's like none of that stuff is relevant to this situation. This is just who is going to kick somebody's butt at the line of scrimmage. That is what this game is going to boil down to who can kick the other guy's butt on, 6 inches, across the line of scrimmage from him. That's what this whole thing is going to boil down to Wednesday.
Both teams want to be physical and both teams want to run the ball, right? Like that's the recipe for good playoff success, and especially for Georgia with the guy who has limited passing ability and limited starting experience as a quarterback. And now you're asking him to make his first start in a college football playoff game. What's the best way to alleviate that? You get a good push and you hand the ball off and you keep doing that until Notre Dame proves they can stop you. And we all know Notre Dame is a run-first team. So, again, this whole matchup comes down to who is going to push each other in that first 6 inches. Who is going to get the advantage?
I'm curious why that analysis worries you, Steven, because
I think a lot of people are fearful of that Georgia defensive line, but I don't think it's any more talented or stronger or physical than that Texas A&M offensive line.
I don't either.
Defensive line, and that was Notre Dame's first start as with a young offensive line pieced together in game 1 on the road. I think this offensive line now, 13 games later. And again, I'm not taking anything away from Georgia's defensive line. Don't get me wrong. It's still a very talented group. I just think that there was more talent on that Texas A&M line. And if a young, inexperienced Notre Dame offensive line could handle that sort of defensive line to a degree on the road, first game of the season, I think they could do it when the stakes matter the most against Georgia. Now that they're a lot more experienced.
Yeah, like Steven's saying, he hopes it comes down to Georgia's quarterback and receiver talent. Again, there's some talent there, but they'd seem more talented if they could actually hold on to the ball. And then he says, more Notre Dame's defensive line. Again, yet not having Riley Mills is a factor. You're going to have Howard Cross though, and Howard Cross is chomping at the bit for this opportunity. Like he likes this opportunity.
Well, also,
go ahead.
Playing into that, Gabriel if there's a game where you wanted Gabriel Rubio to be in there,
this is it.
He's a big dude who can clog the run lanes, and that's what Georgia wants to do. And if he eats a double team, that still leads Howard Cross one-on-one with someone.
Exactly.
So I will take Howard Cross one-on-one and Gabe Rubio eating up a double team and allowing the linebackers to flow off of that. So I don't wish injury, and I would love to have Riley Mills out there, but Gabe Rubio, if you needed him for a game, this is it. That's a big dude that is going to be hard to move in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, everyone would like to see Riley Mills out there as well, but Gabe Rubio, this is the kind of game for him. Irish Eagle 83. Do you think that the time off leaves them a step slow?
I would say I don't think so. And actually, I was listening to Saban talk about this. He actually prefers not having the time off because of you just kind of lose that instinct of hitting someone and feeling that kind of pop a little bit, right? I like the progression that Notre Dame had because I still think, yes, you want to stay fresh, but I don't think you want to lose that killer instinct of hitting someone and, being physically violent with another opponent rather than your own teammates in practice. So I don't think that – I think Notre Dame would have I would expect Georgia to start slower more than I would Notre Dame would.
Well, and I think that's what they're talking about. That was what the question pertained to, is the fact that Georgia hasn't played, in that amount of time. Josh was asking, did I star that up? How healthy is Cross? I mean, he played 54 snaps against Indiana, and his season high snap count is 55 against Louisville. So he played one snap off his season high. So his health is not an issue. He's going to figure it out. He walked in and out of, we saw him at practice. He doesn't look like he's bothered by anything right now. So, and I mean, every game is the biggest game of his career, and it's potentially the last game of his career, So I don't see anything being an issue for Howard Cross. Joe wants to know any news on Notre Dame's uniforms. I hear they're going to wear black this game, actually. Josh says he looked rusty against IU. Well, he hadn't played in a month, so of course he was going to be rusty. Now it's only 10 days since he last played, so I think he'll be fine. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Fill in the blank. Colin Cowherd threw some gas on the fire over the weekend by saying this, quote, "Don't be surprised if the very, very well-known college quarterback transfers to Notre Dame," end quote. So that led to some national recruiting guys like Steve Wiltfong reporting that Notre Dame has no plans to add another transfer portal quarterback this offseason. All of this, Jesse, is blank.
It's all, in my opinion, enjoyable chaos at the end of the day because, I don't think Colin Cowherd just goes out there and spews all of that without at least hearing something, right? Like, the guy is still very well connected. He is
But he's also not a college football reporter. He's literally just lobbing out rumors.
Well, again, but I don't think he's just saying that to say that. I when you're someone of his kind of national presence, I guess you could say, he's had to at least heard that from somewhere. Whether, it's, again, I don't know how reliable his source is and all of those things. And I know Notre Dame has said that they're not going to the portal, but we've heard that before, right? And so I don't know how, if you're Notre Dame, if a bit, and let's play devil's advocate here, right? Say what Colin Cowherd is saying is true, and it has legitimacy. Oh my gosh, legitimacy to it.
Don't try again.
I know it's so bad, but hypothetically, say someone out there is like a Quinn Ewers, an Arch Manning, a Jalen Milroe, and you're Notre Dame, and the opportunity presents itself. I just don't know how you can potentially say no at the end of the day if there's a mutual interest, right? And so
you say no because the future of your program relies on finally developing your own guy going forward. That's how you recruit elite quarterbacks going forward. Like CJ Carr said today, he feels 95% and that he expects to be ready for the spring. CJ Carr is the future of this program. And if you want CJ in a transfer portal, era, if you want these guys to stay around and you want to be able to recruit quarterbacks going forward, you've got to go with your guy. And that's why I think this is all BS. Like, these things popped up a couple of weeks ago as well. And Marcus Freeman has shot this stuff down. And everything that we're hearing is that this is all, wherever these rumors are coming from, did Colin Cowherd just basically regurgitate the same rumor that popped up 2 weeks ago, when this stuff came up before and it's all been shot down? Like, how many times does Marcus Freeman have to step to the microphone and shoot this stuff down? I agree with what Stymie was saying. I think that Colin Cowherd, as he has done before, just likes to use Notre Dame as a clickbait type thing to get people to watch his videos and listen to his podcasts and, just throw this stuff at the wall any opportunity that he gets, because that is what Colin Cowherd is a clickbait artist. I mean, we're talking about it right now, but like, I thought it was, the fact that these guys like Wiltfong have to go out and, report Notre Dame has no plans of going to the portal. Like, it's just insane to me. And it starts with a guy like Cowherd, who, like you said, he might have heard something, but is he basically just hearing the same stuff that, regurgitating the same stuff that popped up a couple of weeks ago? Like,
that's the hard part, in my opinion, is how trustworthy is it? And again, I think it's easy on paper for Notre Dame to say we're not going to. Yes, we're going to develop. We feel like we have the starting quarterback in the room. But I'm just saying, when push comes to shove, and say Arch Manning is there as a redshirt freshman, how do you say no to something like that at the end of the day?
You say no because you have CJ Carr ready to go.
Yeah, but I would take Arch Manning over CJ Carr. And I don't know if that's, voodoo of me to say, but I would take Arch Manning over CJ Carr if the opportunity presented itself.
Blasphemy. It's when push comes to shove and it's time to make a decision,
that's when we'll really know. But I think right now we got to be focused on this playoff game and ending this season. But if someone is legitimately there,
and
that's,
that's, you know,
is
again,
Arch
like
Manning,
the
it's hard
timing
to say
of this,
no.
the fact that this stuff keeps popping up, and Marcus Freeman has to keep shooting it down. Like Corey said, you're just talking crazy right now, Jess.
I'm just saying. If that was the actual situation, it would be hard to say no. Is all I'm. And push comes to shove, it would be hard to say no.
Steven, stirring it up a little bit. You're forgetting Steve Angeli is the next Tom Brady. We need DK here for his Steve Angeli is elite post in the chat. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Charles Jagasaw practiced at right guard when we were able to watch the first 30 minutes of Notre Dame's Saturday practice, their final on-campus practice before they headed to the bowl.
It's very encouraging for multiple reasons. One, you're getting your most talented young offensive lineman back in the mix, right? It shows that he is, progressing and likely going to be ready for next season. And two, if he's practicing at guard, I mean, worst comes to worst, Notre Dame has had injuries along the offensive line. Guys have, had to come out of games. And I know Rocco Spindler says he's back to 100%. But, I mean, all it takes is, one ding. And if Charles Jagasaw needs to step up, I think it's valuable depth to have at the end of the day. At the end of the day. So, again, I think it bodes well for both situations. One, you're getting this is a guy that was going to start. So, obviously, he was your best young offensive lineman. So getting him back and ready for next season is great. But if he needs to step up in this bowl game, I think it's great to have, that kind of depth available.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman said last week that he was going to be practicing and that he was potentially, like in terms of just from a health standpoint, that he could be available, but he didn't say at that point what position he would be practicing and all that kind of stuff. And, I know there's a lot of people who got stirred up right away. Stymie, was it Stymie? Yeah, Stymie was asking full cleared contact practice. Again, we only saw, like position group type stuff because it was the first 30 minutes of practice. So we didn't see, like any contact periods. But, the reps, that I saw, he went out there. It was like he went out and, went to the second level and just kind of stood in front of a linebacker, that kind of thing, just going to the right spot. And that kind of thing. I would not expect, to see Charles Jagasaw for this week, but win this week. And then what happens next week? Again, I don't expect to see him starting. I expect that Rocco Spindler. Now, again, I don't have any inside information. None of us have any inside information in terms of who's going to start, but Spindler was out there and he was moving around just fine. And the kind of guy that Spindler is, again, similar to Howard Cross, Spindler has that kind of mentality. He is a no nonsense, grind you down kind of guy. And he'll spit, kind of take, chew on some Tylenol and go out there and spit on you, throw some mud on it and let's go. So that's who I expect to see starting at right guard when they line up against Georgia Wednesday night. But I do think it's interesting that Jagasaw is out there and he's practicing at guard, at least repping at guard a little bit. So just creeping a little bit closer to getting out there.
I think having Rocco back is so important because when you talk about physicality and the run game, Rocco Spindler is a guy who's just going to play a lot of smash mouth football. He's going to punch you in the face.
Yes.
I don't think he's a guy that has a lot of fears either. He's not thinking of repercussions. He knows one thing, and that's hitting you as hard as he can.
Yes.
And especially in a zone scheme where you have pulling guards, it is ideal to have him back.
Completely agree. So Drayk Bowen was asked if how the Indiana game ended has served as a motivator for the defense after IU scored a couple of late touchdowns in the first round playoff game.
More as a learning point, onsides, hands team, we had some coaching points and we kind of honed in on what we need to do better there. And then, defense, obviously we're going to go look and work through what happened and stuff. But it's more just for learning points of what we need to work on, what we need to improve on, and know that we need to finish games now, not just get to the 5 minutes, but finish everything.
So what do you think, Jess? Again, it was 27-3. Do you have a problem with IU getting a couple late touchdowns with 4 after Notre Dame went up 27-3 with 4:50 to play?
Listen, to me, this is such a mute point. After Ryan Leonard scored that last touchdown, they went up 27-3. I was there. You could physically feel the air kind of finally leaving the building. There was no way IU was coming back from that deficit. And so, I get it as a fan. You don't want to see, your team give up those last 2 touchdowns, and you definitely don't want to see IU get an onside kick and move the ball downfield. But when you're a defense at that point, like, you've done your work. Going into the fourth quarter, IU didn't have over 100 passing or rushing yards. Like, the defense completely dominated that game up until that 4.5-minute mark. And when IU got the ball back after Notre Dame's last touchdown, it's really like, it's so hard to describe to you just the mental kind of letdown that happens as a defensive player, because you're no longer in kind of like fight or flight mode, essentially, kind of survival mode. You kind of naturally know that this game is over. And so what you're thinking about is, let's just not give up the big play, let's not give up the 50-yard bomb,
right,
or the 30-yard chunk play. And so
I know people have a problem with prevent defense, but that's basically what it is. Give up some little underneath stuff, make them use as much clock, make them take as much time as possible.
Exactly. And so, if that game was still, and again, they earned their right because of being in a 27-3 game, but like, if that game was any bit closer, I don't think IU moves the ball, but just naturally things just kind of deflate on their own, and you lose that edge when you basically know the game is over. And when that game was 27-3, IU needed 3 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions just to make it a 3-possession game. Like, the game was over. And I think everyone on the Notre Dame sideline knew that at that point. And so I don't have a problem with it at all. It made the box score a lot closer. But like I said, the defense dominated every aspect of that game up until that 4.5-minute mark.
I thought it was really telling that in Bowen's answer, he talked about the hands team, because
exactly, that's the bigger point.
Yeah, he didn't even talk about, defense, it was not high leverage snaps at that point when there's under 5 minutes to play and you're up by 3 scores in which you need 3 2-point conversions, as well as you need to recover 2 onside kicks, to make that happen. So they were pitching to the scoreboard, and that's what it came down to. And I was a little bit surprised that it was, kind of posed that way. But so Al Golden was asked if Marcus Freeman ever checks with him before Freeman calls for a fake punt.
No, I wish he would check with me once in a while. No, we have those conversations during the week, and really on game day, he makes the call, and you don't want to have that discussion at that time because people are always looking, or it's on the Jumbotron and you're having a discussion and all that. So again, I don't know what's the best way to say it. It's everything he calls is measured. It's not superfluous to the situation. Like, it's not just because I want to cause a stir. There's a measured discipline behind it, and it's great to see.
The one thing when you ask Al Golden a question is, you're going to get a pragmatic answer to it, and that's what you got right there. And say, yeah, sure, I wish that he would let me know. But he I don't know. If you're the defensive coordinator, would you want a little heads up there, Jess, to know that the fake is coming, to know the position that your defense could potentially be put in?
No, I really don't think at the end of the day that's a Marcus Freeman decision, and maybe you just in the mic say, hey, defense, be hot, we're going for a fake punt here.
Right.
But the thing is so
you
often
can't tip it off, like you said, you can't tip it off on the sideline because with Jumbotrons and TV and everything else.
And so often though, and this with these fake punts, they don't even know half the time they're going to run it until they're out there and they see the numbers that are presented across for them, right? And so I just think that fake punts are such a in the moment type situation that really no one deserves to know but the punt unit, because they need that element of surprise to execute and get the numbers that they want. And that's why you practice sudden change or, those kind of things as a defense throughout the season. And so when a sudden turnover happens, or maybe a fake punt doesn't go the way you want, you're ready for those things. Nothing phases you as a defense. And Al Golden would tell you the same thing. Like, we're ready for anything. You know, you could put the ball on the 5-yard line, or you could put the ball on our own 5-yard line, whatever it takes. And so, again, I'm all for a fake punt thrives because of the element of surprise and the numbers. And so you don't know those things until you're out there. So I could care less who knows besides Marcus Freeman.
Part of are we going to run this? Yeah. Part of are we going to run this fake or not is, do we have the right look? Do the numbers stack the way we want them to look to be able to run this fake? And look, Marcus Freeman was a defensive coordinator. He was a linebacker. So like, he knows, like, he's not calling, you know, he's not giving the go ahead for those fakes, you know, unless he's only doing so because he has the confidence in Al Golden and his defense that if it doesn't go the way they want it to, he's got confidence in the defense that they're going to, you know, come up with the stop that they need him to make, you know? So like, you know, as the defensive coordinator, sure, it would be nice to have a little bit of heads up, but at the same time, like, Marcus Freeman is making those calls because he has full confidence in what Al Golden is going to do if it doesn't happen the way they want.
Yeah, and that's a great point. A lot of you have the confidence to run a fake punt inside your own territory because you know your defense is so good at the end of the day, right? And so while you might not be telling the defensive coordinator it's coming, it's still a confidence in your defense because you know you're willing to roll the dice because even if it fails, you believe your defense at worst is going to give up a field goal to this team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just all kind of plays together.
We've got a little bit more on fakes and special teams here because I asked Marty Biagi about Indiana when Indiana had to call that timeout when the Irish used the swinging gate look in the home playoff game. And if he at least got kind of a little bit of charge out of that, you know, just the fact, even though they didn't get to run the play, but they made Indiana burn the timeout when it happened.
I mean, you're thinking through all the different situations and scenarios, and so you know, it's something that again, the excitement is okay. We feel like, and the players feel like, okay, we've accomplished whatever we needed to, you know, at that time.
Is that part of the idea? That, hey, if they call timeout, that's to our benefit. We're down to 2 for the rest of the game.
There's always merit to understanding the whole situation. So for sure, you know, we're yes.
I mean, you got to get a charge as the special teams coordinator out of the fact you're basically in their heads, right? When you make them call that timeout, you got to get a charge out of that, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a success either way. You successfully convert the attempt, or you play a head game and force a team to take a timeout because they're not prepared for what you did. So either way is a win-win for me. But yeah, it's like, it's got to be kind of like an ultimate, like, haha, F you moment because I'm winning either way. We're either getting the first down or you're burning a timeout, and now we're just going to kick the extra point like we would have. And so, again, it's just going back to playing chess within chess at the end of the day, right? Like, a football game is chess, and then the special teams battle is chess within chess. And so the more you can kind of get ahead in that mental warfare of, we're just kind of one step ahead of you, and we're kind of saying F you because we are one step ahead of you, like that plays. And that was the, you know, we talked about Ryan Day being in a mental blender against Michigan. That's the type of stuff that you try to do mentally. You try to blend the other team as much as possible, whether it's game plan, getting a timeout out of them, running a fake field goal, not running a fake field goal, like whatever it might be, the mental warfare is a part of it. And it showed because Cignetti was just not in tune all night. And
he was in a mental blender, especially with the special teams. Like, you talk about the mental blender.
Fair catch every kickoff.
No, yeah, with the fair catches, the fact that he wouldn't go for it, the fact that he was punting. But like when Notre Dame did punt, which was, you know, very infrequently, obviously, in that game. But when Notre Dame did punt, did you notice what Cignetti did? They left the defense on the field. They were so concerned about that. And then the fact that they had to use that timeout as soon as Notre Dame ran that swinging gate, like they were in their heads from start to finish with all the bluster and all the, we kicked the snot out of, we beat the crap out of all these top 25 teams. And whatever else. Kurt Cignetti was in a mental blender, especially when it came to the special teams.
Well, and this is stuff that you see Dan Campbell and the Lions do because it makes teams uncomfortable, you know? And Notre Dame is going to find a way to do this against Georgia. I guarantee if you set the over-under on 0.5 special teams trick plays, I'm going to take the over because they've run now a swinging gate. They've run fake punts. They ran the kickoff reverse against IU as well. Like, they're going to do something in the special teams to make an impact. It's just a matter of when they do it and how much of an element of surprise can they bring.
And even if they don't run it, even if they don't end up running something, because as you already said, it still comes down to when Notre Dame's field goal team lines up or when the punt team lines up or whatever it happens to be, are the numbers where Marty Biagi and Marcus Freeman want them to be before they call it. But at the very least, like, the mental stress that Georgia's special teams units have been under for the last 10 days to try to be ready for anything, like that's already a win for Notre Dame because they're already, just like, even though Kirby Smart has won the championships and everything else, Notre Dame is already in their heads knowing that it's a possibility when they go out there on any special teams play Wednesday night.
Yeah, and that's the fun part of it is whether or not Notre Dame actually decides to execute or run any of these, special teams tricks that they've been practicing this week. Georgia still had to commit time to be prepared for stuff like this. So even if you don't run it, you've kind of still won that battle in a sense because Georgia still had to prepare all week because I guarantee Georgia's special teams coordinator said, you know what? This Notre Dame team runs fake in this game, and this game, and this game, and that game. And so whether or not they run it or not, it's still something that these special teams had to prepare for, and it's still taking attention away from otherwhere. It's just more responsibilities for these players at the end of the day.
And they've all been different kinds of fakes. None of them have looked the same. They're all completely unique and, just the way, like, in the way they've run them, like they all look so different. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Bryce Young is second in the nation in block kicks this year. Like, that's another aspect to it. Beyond just the fakes, Notre Dame is also elite when it comes to blocking kicks, so that just adds another layer to it, another wrinkle to it that that's something that they have to be on the lookout for.
And the more you make a team uncomfortable, the less decisive and quickly they can play. And so what did we talk about? You play your best when you're decisive, you fast, your assignment, but the more assignments you got to worry about, the less I think fast you can play. So it's just overall bodes well for Notre Dame. And I just think it's tremendous because, BK teams really did nothing like this, to be honest with you.
They were
the most
Brian
vanilla
Kelly,
team.
He was he was the scared guy, basically. Like, he was just worried about, making sure that, we've talked about that. It's been a while since we've talked about it, but they were completely satisfied with special teams being a break even, just
don't make a mistake.
That's right. Don't make a mistake. And that was like the whole message. And so much of the way Brian Kelly coached was about don't make a mistake. And we've seen such a swing, and like we talked about that in the Northern Illinois loss, right? Like, so much of that felt like they were just concerned about, Riley Leonard making a mistake and like mistakes happening. Like, so much of that attitude has swung since then. It's completely night and day different.
And I think that ultimately when you play like this, it goes back to one of my favorite, I can hear him saying it in my head right now. When I was in high school, we had this, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but he was our wide receiver coach, but he was also kind of our personal hype coach. And every time we'd be getting lined up to stretch, he'd be, it's payday. And the number one thing he said is you're the hammer or you're the nail. And I feel like Notre Dame, and the reason why I'm so confident in them compared to teams in the past, is it finally feels like Notre Dame is the hammer. They want to be the hammer, and they're not going to be the nail. They're not waiting to get hit. They're not waiting to go out and be aggressive. They're the aggressive team. They're the hammer. And so that is, again, that just goes back to, you asked me at the beginning of the show, am I excited, am I confident? That plays into my confidence because Notre Dame wants to be the hammer. They're no longer waiting around and saying,
the
we're
nail.
happy
Yeah.
to be here. We're going to be the nail. They want to be the hammer no matter who they're playing, and they're going to bring that physicality and be the hammer every game. And that's the difference to me, and that's why I love Marcus Freeman.
Will wants to know if there will be an IB post-game show. The answer, Will, is of course there is. There will always be a post-game show. It does not matter.
Do you not know who Brian Driscoll is?
That's right. It does not matter what time the game ends. And boys and girls, especially if Notre Dame wins, well, maybe, like either way, like you're probably going to be there till 5 a.m. So if you want a post-game show, show up. It's going to be there. There will always be a post-game show. Steven says all night long. You mean all morning long, my friend. There will be a post-game show. So you've got that to look forward to. So Hamburglar just brought this up in the chat, and we were going to talk about it anyway. Cam Ward, of course, threw 3 touchdown passes in the first half of Miami's Pop-Tarts Bowl loss to Iowa State. Then he took himself out of the game for the second half after becoming the Division I all-time touchdown pass leader. So a lot of people, a lot of feelings about this, and you and I were watching this game as it happened. So, and I know you've got some very specific feelings about this yourself. What do you think about how Miami and Cam Ward handled the whole situation?
I couldn't wait for this question. I'm glad you brought this up. I got into a good argument with one of my best friends about this. It's polarizing, and I think that's what makes these kind of questions so fun is you get an opinion about it. And here's my opinion. I don't care if you're Cam Ward and you sit out and that's the case, or if you play the game. I mind the reason why I got so upset about this is because you decided to do both. Like, to me, you're all in. You either play the whole game or you sit out the whole game. And
that's where I am. That's where I am.
I don't care what you do either side, but just commit fully to it, because what you're telling me is if you're so concerned about getting injured, then why were you good to play the first half and get the personal record that's all about me, right?
Right.
Because you're still.
And if you're the head coach, even if you agreed to this, like you knew going in, how could you agree to that? You know what I mean? Like, how could that be? How could you agree to that as a head coach? Because as Steven says, this says something about the culture, not just Miami. He says not just Miami's culture, but how could you agree to that, to let a guy play just to get a record? Then it's like, okay, you're going to get your, because like the one side of it is Cam Ward didn't have to play at all because he is going to be one of the top picks in the NFL draft. It's going to be him and Sanders at the top of the draft. But so he didn't have to play at all. But I agree with what you're saying. You're either in or you're out. There is no in between. That's what it comes down to.
And that's what made me mad, is because you didn't care enough to get your personal record, but to go on and finish the game for your team in a very tight game where if you probably played, you win that bowl game. And I know the bowl game isn't a New Year's Six or, a college football game, but it's still the freaking Pop-Tart Bowl. You're still going against a ranked opponent. And so if you're healthy enough and don't care enough for 2 quarters to get your personal record, then how do you all of a sudden care for the last 2 quarters, and you're willing to leave your team out to dry and not go on and win a bowl game? Because that took the entirety of the season to get to that bowl game and through those first 2 quarters, right? Like, if he sat out, then why shouldn't the rest of the team just not play the whole second half is really my thought process. So again, I think it's an error on the coach. I think it's an error on the quarterback. Do what you want, but you're either all in or all out. I don't like this, 50-50 thing. And that's really where I got upset, because again, you can't tell me that you're worried about your, future and your draft stock when you're literally willing to play 2 quarters to get your own personal record.
I agree. Like, as a head coach, I don't know how you're letting someone play just to get, because if the idea is you're sitting out now so that, to protect yourself from injury or what, I mean, obviously you could have been injured at any point during the first half. And that's, like Keaton was saying, so we're mad that he played, but not that, but also mad that, he didn't play enough, basically. So it's just, I just, you're in or you're out. That's what it comes down to me. You're in or you're out. Like Mike was saying that Malik Neighbors did the same thing for LSU last year. I don't know I would not go for this if I were coaching, whatever.
I think it's more controversial than just picking one side or the other as well, because you're going to get into something like this. Like, again, you're saying that you're worried about being a top 5 draft pick, but you're only worried for 2 quarters, right?
Right.
Like, that rationale doesn't line up when you're willing to play half of the game,
right,
and not the other half. It just doesn't line up, in my opinion.
Yeah. And like how, like people talk about bowl games, like setting, like the tone for your off season and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, if you're going to go play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, like how much that actually impacts your off season, I don't know, but are like, you play to win the game, right? And if your best player is standing on the sideline after he went out there and only played to set a personal record, which is going to be broken anyway once Dylan Gabriel throws, what does he need? Like 1 touchdown pass or 2 touchdown passes?
Yeah.
Like it's going to be broken again anyway. So like, okay, great. You held the record for 5 days. Good, great. And not to mention the fact that, what was it, like 70 some of his touchdown passes came at Incarnate Word, which is a completely different level. So I don't know. You're not supposed to like it's a team sport. And I just keep going back to it. You're in or you're out. DK coming in late, throwing heat. Said Brian doesn't take the 4 days after Christmas off. I don't know who takes the 4 days after
now,
Christmas
why is
off.
his picture just Josh Pate's forehead?
Is that who that is?
I believe that is Josh Pate just zoomed in, and it looks like he might have slapped an ND logo on his forehead as well.
Outbound appreciate you. Hit that like button. Hit that thumbs up before you leave, everybody. We've got a few questions left. Speaking of the Pop-Tarts Bowl, do you buy or sell the Pop-Tarts Bowl being in the college football playoff rotation?
I do, and the Pop-Tart Bowl is just the bowl that we don't deserve. It's become my favorite bowl between the mascots, the Pop-Tart mascots, and ripping themselves out of the wrapper, and now this year they had the sprinkles all along the sideline, and you got the trophy that's got a toaster in it. Like, this is like, it's my favorite bowl, and I think that it's marketing genius. And I would have no problem with it being in that rotation, because every year it's the bowl outside of the New Year's Six and the playoffs. It's the bowl I'm most looking forward to watching.
Did you see the picture of the strawberry Pop-Tart like up in the top of the stadium by himself? I think he was like, he was the flavor of last year or something like that. I mean, it is like, what took Pop-Tarts so long to sponsor a book? Because they have got this thing figured out. In only 2 years, like, they have risen to the top of the college football zeitgeist with the Pop-Tarts and, live your dream, or, whatever it is, dreams come true, and you go down into the toaster and all that kind of stuff. John says the Duke's Mayo Bowl is a good one too. Mayonnaise is just disgusting though. Like,
did you see
Pop-Tarts
what
are so much better.
Did you see what the Syracuse coach did in that Mayo Bowl, by the way?
I did not.
So there was a guy, like a couple guys who I think were supposed to be the guys that got the mayo dumped on them, and all the other players were standing in the back, and they faked it and turned around and just launched all the mayo on the people who thought that they were not going to get covered in mayo. And then I saw something too where I think maybe the Duke Mayo Bowl tweeted something at the Pop-Tart Bowl, and it had a Pop-Tart dipped in mayo.
Oh, even more disgusting.
I was like, what are we doing here? But I mean, it's just like, it's just bowl game genius, in my opinion. Like, whoever the marketing people are for Pop-Tart have to be living rich right now, because they've knocked it out of the park the last 2 years.
How did Cheez-It leave the bowl game business? Like, just when it felt like they were kind of getting a little bit of buzz, with Carter Curls and, that whole thing, like, is it Cheez-It, Cheez-Its? You were supposed to say Cheez-It crackers, not Cheez-Its. And that whole thing, that was a thing a couple of years ago. They got a lot of good buzz. It feels like Cheez-It needs to slide itself back in. Duke's Mayo, again, I'm not so hot on, but like,
you just hate mayo.
Oh, I can't stand mayo. someone just said, Outbound said, we need a Reese's Bowl. Like that, like, how are they only doing the Senior Bowl? Why are they not sponsoring an actual bowl game? And, you know, like, it just feels like all of this stuff together. Like someone was asking, like, Corey said, when did Snoop get his own bowl? I guess when he decided to shell out the money for it, because Jimmy Kimmel had a bowl game last year. Yeah. I mean, you shell out the money, you get your name on the sponsorship. That's
also a very cool field, though. Like this, I showed you that picture of the Snoop Dogg field, inspired by Gin and Juice. It was it was very cool to look at, and I appreciate this because I think it's bringing more of this kind of enthusiasm and fun to these playoff and New Year's Six bowl games, and I think we need more of it.
That's why, like if you got more, like these food and snacks involved in some of these bowl games of that level, I feel like maybe you'd get a little bit more, but like you'd bring a little buzz and excitement. That's like the only reason I wouldn't want to see Pop-Tarts get into the championship rotation, even though it would be cool to see, like the national champion get a big Pop-Tart, like maybe they just need to invite the snacks to be part of the trophy presentation or something like that. But it's a lot of fun. I think that Pop-Tart has got this whole thing figured out with how they've done it the last couple of years. Andre says Notre Dame women's basketball team is awesome. Oh, he's going to be at North Carolina. All right, I'll see you next Sunday, Andre.
He's going to bring this thing home for us.
Fill in the blank, Jesse. Your biggest takeaway. Jesse was at his first Notre Dame women's basketball game of the season yesterday. Your biggest takeaway from the 95-54 win over Virginia yesterday is blank.
So before I get into this, I got to thank my man Wayne, Notre Dame usher.
Big Wayne,
big listener of the show.
Yep.
You being as VIP as you are, you got us some nice upfront seats. Wayne and all the other ushers got us to our seats, made us felt like everything was great. So I got to give him a shout out.
Mark. Yeah,
Ray.
I don't know who else was over there helping out. I saw the army of ushers though helping. Very, very appreciative of that.
So
Wayne. That's
had to give that shout out first. But my biggest takeaway from the women's basketball team is I mentioned this earlier when talking about Notre Dame's run game, but Niele Ivey, kind of said it best. It's pick your poison between Hannah Hidalgo, Sonia Citron, and Olivia Miles, because Sony put 25 on you. Olivia had a very quiet triple-double. Like, I didn't even realize she had a triple-double until the game was over. And then you get into the aspect of, Leotu King. You now have depth between the two bigs are Koval and
Kate Koval, Liza Carlin.
Carlin and Koval. I knew they were both Ks, and I always get it mixed up. But, getting them back is a lot of depth. And so I guess my biggest takeaway is we already knew this team was uber talented, right? They beat USC, they beat Texas, they beat UConn with limited rosters, right? Still getting a lot of people back from injury. And so the more that they keep adding depth, and the person who I told you I think is the biggest difference maker is Leotu King, because she's the enforcer out there. You know what you're getting between those three guards, but that girl plays physical. She's a great defender. And so the more you get out of Leotu King, Koval, Maddie Westbelt coming back at some point, it only makes this team more dangerous because of the depth that they will now have, right? Like, what those guards are going to do to you. Like, they're national players. But the thing that impressed me most was just the way that they all are in synchronization together. Like, if one of them is always going to be open at the end of the day, it feels like.
Pick your poison is exactly it.
Yeah, it's right. Just pick your poison. And so the more that they get other players healthy and back, and the more they get depth, I just don't know who can compete with them, because, again, they've already beat some of the best teams in the country with very limited depth.
And that's what I said. Olivia came on the post game with me right after the game yesterday, and she makes something that is not easy look ridiculously easy because of the kind of passes that, and like by the time the third and fourth, like the third quarter, like when when Citron started hitting all
They
the
weren't guarding
three-pointers.
her. She was
That's right.
literally open in the corner every time.
It's like, feel free to not play zone and, just let, her be wide open or let Hidalgo be wide open in the corner. But there's always somebody open because of the fact that it is pick your poison. Again, what Miles does is not easy, but she makes it look so easy because of the fact that, you have to choose defensively. And there's always somebody open. And, she can have 14 assists. She can have she can have triple doubles 2 games in a row, like that, because there's always somebody open out there.
And I think the other thing that really impresses me is how active Miles, King, Citron get on the boards outside of their bigs. They're like Notre Dame doesn't rely on their bigs to get all the rebounds, and they out-rebound the heck out of other teams with players like Miles. I mean, she had a triple-double, so obviously she was getting rebounds. But you know what I mean?
Miles, Citron, and Hidalgo all average over 6 rebounds a game, 3 guards.
Which is insane for guards, right?
Yeah.
So, their ability to crash the board and they're just overall pesky because even though they score a lot of points, Hedda Hidalgo and Miles are annoying on defense. They are always picking your pocket, creating turnovers, and that's the thing too, is Notre Dame creates so many easy baskets in transition because of their great defense and their ability to just pickpocket you. I don't know how many times I saw yesterday, they steal a pass and then Hidalgo streaking down the court and gets an easy layup, or King, you know what I mean? Whoever needs to run out in transition. And so they just make scoring look so easy and so effortless. And I think that's what also makes them dangerous.
And I thought yesterday's game might be at least a little bit more competitive for a half because the Virginia coach, Agugwa Hamilton, she's kind of brought a different culture. They were solid last year, and the point guard that they've got, Kimora Johnson, she was second team all conference, and they've got a couple players. Again, I just thought at least for maybe a half, it would be more competitive, but a 28-0 run it was 16-0 run to end the first quarter, 12-0 run to start the second quarter. And it was, just basically over at that point. So it's, they're pretty scary. It's going to be interesting now that they're getting into, full-fledged conference play because North Carolina's got a pretty nice record. Georgia Tech coming up here in a couple of weeks is undefeated as of right now. But I think, who they played in non-conference play, North Carolina's played some teams, but it's going to be interesting because these conference, again, there's some teams I think it's 6 teams in the ACC that are ranked right now, but I don't know. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to some of these games coming up to really see kind of, how some of these other teams are truly going to be able to stack up to what Notre Dame's got, because it's already pick your poison, and Maddie Westbeld, if everything goes as planned, is going to be back very soon as well. So they're just going to keep getting deeper and deeper. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate you being here. Hit that like button. Vince will be checking in tomorrow from New Orleans. And a little programming note. We're going to start an hour later than usual tomorrow because of the fact that Vince is down there in New Orleans and got some stuff going on. So we're going to start at 6:00 Eastern tomorrow night. And just a reminder, yes, there will be a post-game show. So there will be a post-game show after that late game on New Year's Day. And but we've got Penn State, Boise State coming up tomorrow as well. So that's going to be fun. First quarterfinal playoff game. Jesse, enjoy your New Year's. Be safe. Have fun. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.